Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 22nd episode of Genealogy Pep Talk, a podcast. My name is Suzanne, and I am a senior library specialist with Arapahoe Libraries here in Colorado. I have two other staff members with me who are my fellow co-hosts on this podcast journey. There is Cindy, a library specialist, and Katie, a career services librarian. Hi, ladies.
Hello.
Hello.
This podcast is about gathering some tips and tricks for your family search journey for whenever you get stuck on searching for an ancestor, because it does happen. We also share with you some experiences of our own, along with anecdotes and stories in researching our own families. Our special guest for today's episode, because we do have a special guest today, is Lary. He is a library specialist here with Arapahoe Libraries, and he has some local ties to a small town here in Colorado. And Lary also brought some items in for show and tell. He is also an avid bird-watching poet. Wow, this sounds like the TV show The Dating Game from the 1970s, doesn't it? Sorry, ladies, he's attached.
Aww.
Right, that's a kind of a poor joke, but okay, anyway, we'll keep it in. Okay, hi, Lary.
Hi, Suzanne. Thanks for having me on board here.
Thanks for coming to the Genealogy Pep Talk, a podcast, and not a TV game show. The small town in question is just a short distance from us here at the Coba Library, and it's Elizabeth. And for people unfamiliar with that town, Elizabeth is located in Elbert County, which is located on the other side of I-25 and Parker Road. I did a quickie research on the town, and it was founded in 1890 and had about 300 people living there during that time. Now, Elizabeth has grown and has roughly 3,000 residents right now. So, Lary, what year was your family part of that population growth?
Well, I don't know the exact year, but I do know that, for example, on my mom's side, that her parents, Carlo and Ursula, when they sold the Lone Star Ranch, they retired to Elizabeth. Mm-hmm. And so that was, I would say, probably about early 1940s when they retired and started living in Elizabeth. And then my grandfather, on the other side, my dad's side, he ranched outside of Elizabeth, probably beginning in the early 20s and such, and something like that. So, yeah, that's...
Okay, so when you go out there for a Sunday drive on a Tuesday, let's say, what kind of memories does it bring up via your mom living there and your dad living there?
Well, unfortunately, most of them my grandparents had passed away by the time I was 10, so I don't have any living memories of Elizabeth. My older brother and sister do. They are about 10 to 15 years older than me, and so they do remember going out to seeing my grandparents on my mom's side. However, I do have knowledge of where they lived, and I do go out to the cemetery yearly because both sides of the family are in the cemetery there.
Nice.
And
that's good.
You mentioned my bird watching. There used to be a time in my life when I would go out to Elizabeth probably 3 times a year to check on my bluebird trail. I had a little bluebird trail out there.
Oh.
Yeah. And
Sweet.
so a relative of on my dad's side had a little farm out there that I put bluebird boxes on and would go out there and check on them, clean them out, that kind of thing. So pretty familiar with the area, although I wished I had gotten more familiar with it.
Yeah, sure.
In fact, I have a poem about that if you'd like
You
me
do?
to read it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this real quick, and we'll go to the poem.
Right.
What does a bluebird box look like?
Good question, and it's really unique too, because when you think about it, the bluebirds that are out there are mountain bluebirds, and in their name, mountain, they should be in the mountains. But if you think about Elizabeth area, if you're familiar with it, and if you're not, it's almost as if you're living in the mountains, because we have ponderosa pines out there. We have ridges. We have actually a lot of species out there that are, if you will, found in the foothills and the mountains. And so the mountain bluebirds out there, they are in particular need for bluebird boxes because they nest in old woodpecker holes. And so,
Oh, wow.
there's not as many trees out there as there are in the mountains. So the bluebird box itself is kind of a longish box that has a hole in it that they are cavity nesters. So they'll be going in there, and they don't need anything to perch on. They just cling on to the end of the hole there, kind of, and they make their nests in there, and they will nest in there sometimes up to 2 to 3 broods a season.
Okay. All right. So now we're talking about boxes. So I'm curious. Okay, real quick. You know the box that sometimes you'll see that is perched somewhere on a fence, but it has a thin opening. Do you know what I'm talking about? Anybody know what I'm talking about?
Could be a bat box.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Or even the butterfly
Okay.
things too. But yeah,
Okay.
these boxes have lids you take off that you can clean out.
Okay.
You like to clean out the nests.
Yeah. Okay.
encourage
That
it.
makes
If you
sense.
drive out there, if you do keep your eyes open, they're just plain wood.
Yeah.
And because my daughter and I still do it in Castle Rock, just for the town of Castle Rock.
Yeah.
To help with it really does help
nice, yeah.
mosquito eradication and things
Gotcha.
like that. So yeah, if you keep your eyes peeled, you will see them, and they are on these wooden posts.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Because it almost looks like a mailbox. So let's go back to the bird watching poet side.
Oh, okay.
You
So
have a
this is
poem.
just a poem I wrote many years ago with regards to that area,
Yeah.
and it's. I'll just read it to you here,
Thank
and then
you.
we can talk. The title is "I Want to Say I Know This Valley." I want to know this valley without having to say so. I want to say the snowdrift's meanest this side of the pines. To know the light of stars, the stars, the stars. I want to sit my horse, a tough, big-eyed wish, back to the wind and survey what's certain. A stretch of crick and pines south of Elizabeth, Colorado. To build a fire, to heat the irons like Grandpa did. Double quarter circle, open A.
That's awesome.
Yes, round of applause.
It would be so. Do you have any pictures, or do they have any pictures of their ranch then? Because that area has grown so
man,
much.
has it,
So I
yeah.
bet in the 20s and 40s, they're just really. I mean, that would be really far away from Denver. I bet going into town was like a huge deal.
Yeah, probably
Yeah.
2 days.
Yeah,
At least.
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
a huge deal, and in fact, my on my mom's side, my grandparents who only spoke Italian, so they only spoke Italian in the house, and Mom didn't speak any English until she got to school.
Right.
Wow.
But my grandfather Carlo would make his own wine,
Oh,
and
nice.
one of his famous quotations is "Water is for washing, wine is for drinking."
I like that.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
they would make. I don't know if it was necessarily a weekly. I don't think it was a weekly trip. I would think it's more of a monthly trip to Denver.
Wow.
And his favorite store in Denver was Pinelli's, and Pinelli's was where he could sit around and talk to the other Italians.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, my grandma Ursula and my mom, for example, would go shopping at Woolworths and have lunch.
Yeah.
So, and he
Yes.
would buy his grapes in Denver and take them back to the farm to make
Wow.
his wine.
Very
That
cool.
would be
Oh, man.
really awesome.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
a sight to see. That
Yeah.
would have been wonderful.
That's a little different story than what we usually hear.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice out there in the country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, do you know why they decided to farm out there? Because in those days, that must have just been in the middle of nowhere.
Right. And in fact, I kind of, my own kind of naming of that kind of farming, I kind of call it hard scrabble farming because
Yeah.
although they did have I was just looking at a bill of sale for their last ranch, and they had like 96 head of, a head of cows and such. But the reason why the Italians went out there was they came over in the 20s, so they were starving actually in Italy as farmers. They had they had been farming for 15 years. Things were terrible. They had let's see, about 8 kids, and they had 7 kids in tow, and then they had 2 kids here, and my mom being one. But anyway, they were invited. They had to be invited by somebody, and so
sponsored or something by
Right.
somebody. Yeah.
so my a distant relative, Joseph Tapero, who lived in another small town in the eastern Colorado, and he was the one who invited them. So that's how they ended up in that area.
Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, because like there's not a whole lot of rain out there, you
Yeah.
know, and I don't think there's any irrigation in that area
No.
at
yeah.
all.
Yeah, you're
There's
right.
not much to irrigate either. As
Yeah.
you called
Right.
it, it was a creek, no,
Yeah, it was
no river.
Kiowa Creek. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I did look up a little bit of population data on Elizabeth. As far back as I can go, it goes back to like 2014, and that's when the real growth started,
Yeah.
apparently.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, talk about that part. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I took a moment and I tried to look up some population data on Elizabeth just to see kind of when maybe it started to boom. And I couldn't find a whole lot. I'm sure if I went back and looked at the census records or whatever, but just a cursory glance, and it looks like in 2014 is kind of when the population started to grow a lot. It was just under 1,500 in 2014. And then this says for 2024, it was just under 3,000. And then for 2025, I was expected to go a little bit over 3,000. So it would be interesting to find some more historical data, but even pretty recent history sounds like it's even been a very small town.
Yeah, that town. It's a tiny town. When you drive through it, there's just a couple of those businesses, a couple restaurants.
Yeah.
It's like, blink
know.
and you miss it.
Yeah.
I used to call it, because I would do, you remember my Sunday drive on a Tuesday?
Oh, yeah.
I would do that, and I love little mini road trips, for a couple of hours. And I would go out to Elizabeth a lot, and I'd go at least one time per season, because it's beautiful out there.
Yeah.
And there was I call it the circuit. So I'd kind of go on, it's 86, and you kind of go to, I can't remember the road, but there's a Safeway, and hang a right, and then you just kind of follow that, and then you kind of get to a stop sign intersection. 2 of those roads are dirt. My rule is no dirt roads. And then I hang a left, and I get to the stop sign. And then that is Elbert County Road, or North Elbert County Road. And then if you hang a right, about like half mile is Elbert. And then if you go the other way, you follow that for a couple miles, and you're back on 86. And when you're on 86 at that point, you hang a right, and you go to Kiowa.
Yeah.
So, and it's very small, and Elbert is the tiniest.
Albert
I think
is like
It's like
just-
there's
it's-
nothing there.
yeah.
No offense to
I don't-
Albertines,
Yeah,
but
Albert. Yeah.
Elbert residents, but it is so small. And then Kiowa, I don't know, maybe that's even smaller. I don't know.
I think Kiowa is smaller. It's
Yeah.
like maybe 7 more miles past. I think
Yeah.
those towns were like 7 miles apart.
Well, it's a fun drive, and it's now I'm sure though there's a lot more building there, because if you listen to the news, once in a while they have a story about Elizabeth, and a building and housing and whatever. So your father was German, and I think we talked about this briefly. Do you know from what area in Germany?
I believe near Frankfurt.
Near Frankfurt.
Yeah,
Okay.
and right, and he went back to Germany in World War II.
Wow.
Yeah, that must be weird.
That was yeah, and
Yeah.
it wasn't a pleasant experience.
Yeah. And that was my next question.
Right.
Your dad was a POW during World War II, and that must have been quite a story for him to tell, if he told it at all.
Right. I don't ever remember Dad actually telling the story.
Yeah.
But he did write it down, and we do have some things left over from that time in which he recorded. One being a prayer book that he kept, that they were all issued, that he kept in his pocket, and he kept notes on when they were being moved between POW camps. But the story goes back to Dad. He volunteered for the Army Air Corps and went in at 19.
Wow.
And at the time, he and my mom, who was 17, they were engaged.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just a farm boy, too light to be a pilot.
Mm-hmm.
So he
Wow.
ended up being a radio man and went to radio school and stuff.
Yeah. Wow.
And that was a very important, position on the plane. And
Yeah.
at that time, in the B-17 bombers, I guess the radios were pretty big or heavy.
Yeah.
So anyway, this was late in the war, I believe, 1944. Their first mission was out of England, and they flew a night mission to Berlin, and they were the one plane in trailing the whole squad or all the other planes. And so their plane was to fill in if anybody had a problem. And they actually turned back because there were no problems going on. And they were flying back and encountered anti-aircraft flak over Holland. Amazingly, the pilot ditched the plane in a lake in Holland. Yeah.
Oh.
And so it was that night. Everybody successfully got out of the plane. Dad was the last because the radio came last, I guess. And they could hear dogs barking on the shore, and those were the dogs of the Germans awaiting them. And
Oh,
so,
wow.
Sheesh.
one thing that he did note in his notes was that that night in the Dutch jail that they were put in this town was the last good meal he had for a year.
Oh, wow.
And it was actually donated by the locals.
Oh,
that kind
wow.
of thing. So, yeah. But at that point, the papers in which he was recorded, they recorded his name. They recorded the last name with two N's, which we had dropped one in after World War I or during World War I.
Yeah.
So you could tell that they definitely recognized it as a German name, and you put it down as a
Oh,
German
yeah.
name.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
So,
We recognize your last name as a German name today.
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah.
Did he write that it went? Did it make any difference that he was a German, an American German, or?
I don't believe so. Yeah. And he, in his notes too, he would use a shortened word for the Germans and such. So I don't think they were, I don't think it made any difference. Yeah.
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 But
Wow.
I could imagine if anything, it'd make it worse. I don't know.
That's what I would think. That's what I would.
Yeah.
That's why I was asking.
Yeah.
yeah, one interesting fact that I came across at one point about this time period and eastern Colorado was that, there were, I guess, sympathizers
Yeah.
with the German cause, and supposedly in the eastern Colorado area, farms that painted their mailboxes blue signaled that they were sympathizers with
Oh, really?
Nazi Germany.
Wow.
I don't know where I got that from, but I do remember coming across that. So
Wow.
Interesting.
So, Larry, I don't know if we just touched on this and I just forgot, but what did your father's family farm or raise on the ranch?
well, I think it wasn't a real big operation, but I think they had wheat and I'm trying to see here. I have a couple notes here from my mom's side, and they had corn, beans, alfalfa. They had pigs, chickens, horses. My mom would go out in the fields and work with the hired men in terms of pulling the weeds and such, that kind of thing. They used hoes, for harvest. They used threshing machines.
Wow.
Yeah, my grandma would make dinner for the hired help during harvest and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it wasn't, it's not the kind of agriculture that we see today so much, in terms
Right.
of being monoculture and such,
Yeah.
And so, but definitely when, as we were talking off mic, that it wasn't irrigated, so it was kind of dry land farming, so you had to make do with what you could.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, I would imagine I mean, they had milk cows as well as beef cows. So, both those things. My mom says that in the interview that I had with her, that they, combined, the milk would be picked up and that kind of thing. So,
So when you came in, we saw some implements. Do you want to share what those implements are?
Sure.
'Cause I think they relate.
Yeah. Well, at the very end of that poem, I mentioned the phrase double quarter circle open A. And that actually is on my dad's side, it's my grandpa's brand. So that was the
Okay.
brand that he used
Wow.
for their cattle. And
Wow.
so, yeah, and I do have here in the studio the actual brands. And they're kind of neat to look at because they're very heavy. They're very long because you didn't want to get too close to the animal, probably.
No.
Right.
I know.
And there's two of them.
Okay.
The one brand is, I'll pick it up here. The one brand is the Open A, and it's just like a triangle without the bottom. And then the other brand is the Quarter Circle, which is kind of like a comma turned on its side, I guess, or something like that. And so that one would be used twice to get the double quarter circle, so one on top of the other.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this is show and tell, but it's more like describe and tell.
Yes.
As
Yeah.
Katie said earlier.
Yeah.
So how long do you think those implements are? They look like about maybe 2.5, 3 feet?
Yeah.
2.5 feet?
2.5 probably.
Yeah.
And so on the end of it, there's a little circle where I guess you'd hang it up, and then
Right.
the end is a shape. So the one in your right hand, what's that shape? It looks like you know what it looks like? Okay, bear with me. Like a false eyelash applier.
There you go.
It does kind of, yeah.
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 Okay.
Just around, yeah.
And I would imagine, I don't know who made these, but they're very. They would definitely hold up, but it could have been made by somebody in town. I would
Probably
imagine.
some local the
Blacksmith.
local blacksmith
Yeah.
probably
Is
did
there
it.
any
you know?
engraving on there saying who made it? Or?
No, there's not to my knowledge.
Okay, so what it is, it's like a V upside down.
Yeah.
And so you would do the V upside down with a little eyelash applier on top of that.
Correct.
Okay.
Twice. Yeah.
Twice.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that would be registered with the state of Colorado. I
Oh,
would imagine.
okay.
So, and I know you can look those things up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't
you
know.
can.
So.
I wonder,
Yeah,
do
my husband grew up on a horse farm,
oh,
and so he knows like a lot about that. Yeah, Brian grew up on a horse ranch in Castle Rock.
Okay.
interesting.
Yeah. There you go.
Were there like guidelines to choosing, or did you just come up with something
Yeah,
as
I
a
don't know.
brand?
I think you
don't
made
know.
it up,
Oh,
and
that
then you
could have to-
registered your thing.
You have to
pay for
research
that
now.
registration.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
had to pay for
Yeah.
it, so that if your
Right.
cattle turned up
Yeah.
somewhere,
It's like a copyright
that they
for
weren't
cattle.
supposed to
Yep.
be,
I was going to say trademark, yeah.
Livestock
trademark, yeah.
copyright.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
and it
gosh.
probably couldn't be too close in
Yeah,
design to
yeah.
any of your neighbors, so
Right.
that
Yeah,
they could,
probably, yeah.
kind of modify it.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, Larry, your mother was Italian, and from the top of the boot, which we learned in school because Italy is shaped like a boot. So northern Italy. And what I looked at, and I had my notes here. Here we go. Boscanero, Italy. Isn't that where your mother's side, your grandparents are from?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And that's pretty close to, I believe, France and Switzerland. And yeah, they. My grandfather Carlo is from Montenero, Italy, and
nice.
Ursula, his wife, was from Veralingo. Yeah, they had 10 children. I guess they had 8 in Italy, and then my mom and my uncle Norman were here in Colorado. Mom was the youngest, but they had 2 sons die in early childhood in Italy. So yeah, they had quite a crew to come over, and just going back to that World War II thing, my uncle Dominic, he was in a tank corps for the U.S. Army, and he actually was able to go into Boscanero in his tank.
Wow.
And that was, I think, probably a very emotional moment for him, but it also became a very, as I have heard, something of a sad thing, because people were in such dire situation at the end of the war there, that when they found out that he was related to people there, then it got to be kind of uncomfortable. But so I did do the Ancestry.com thing some years ago, and thinking, okay, I'll probably end up with a whole bunch of Italian. I've always thought of myself being half Italian because mom was full Italian in my eyes, but it turns out, that's more of a political, social thing than it is necessarily genetic. So I came back more French than anything.
Wow.
So there you go.
Interesting. Yeah, a surprise that you didn't know.
Yes, totally. Yeah. So, the interesting thing about mom's generation is that, at least for her especially, they didn't really want to be identified as Italian, I think.
Really?
Because they were first generation. So we never indulged in Italian stuff in our home, right? So it's been the generations after that have sought the Italian.
Right.
My sister, she learned Italian. She went to Marquette University and then ended up going for a year abroad in Rome, and that's where she eventually met her husband.
Wow.
And so she sought the Italian, I guess, becoming a real gardener, a master gardener. And I have too sought the Italian by becoming a micro farmer of garlic and all that,
So here's the important question: spaghetti.
Oh, pasta! I love pasta. Yeah.
Yeah.
But but
Who doesn't though?
who doesn't, right? Yeah. So we had spaghetti in our home, but it was very mild. Nothing fancy or anything.
Yeah.
And she made great lasagna, but again, it was quite. It wasn't anything. We just didn't. I never heard my mom speak Italian, but she knew how to speak Italian.
Right.
So that was part of it, And I think also moving off of the farm, they never went to. Dad came back from the war, and of course he went right to work and worked for the Denver Dry Goods for 41 years.
Wow, I loved that store.
I know,
so
it was a great
much.
store, wasn't it? And the tea room downtown. And
Oh my, yeah, I loved that.
a real culture of, and it felt like, when we would go into the store, he opened the store in Colorado Springs at the Citadel.
Wow.
And then he came back up here and became a assistant manager at South Glen.
Oh, wow.
So that's, but I just remember going into the store back in the day and feeling like royalty because people respected you.
Yeah.
You were the assistant manager's family and stuff. And it was just something else. I mean, there was a different kind of era, but.
So what I was wondering, Larry, you have, tell us about the book you have in front of you, because it seems like you have pictures and all kinds of different things. Have you compiled that, or is that a family affair? Or?
Yeah, so I have a lot to owe to my mom because she was the one who, after all of us had grown and such, she went ahead and did create these little folders that she gave to each of us. So the folder says Family History, and then it's got my name on it.
Nice.
And so that was the one I got. And so she was very equitable in terms of there's 4 of us siblings, so she gave each of us spread out the original. I think I have the original certificate of citizenship for my grandfather Carlo right here. This looks
Wow.
like the original,
Wow.
but she did color copies of everything. So then she took old photos, and did color copies, and just made it into a very simple little book that has both sides of the family in it, and we each have this, so that's really cool. It's got pictures of the farm. This is a picture here of Nestor Grange Hall, and that's where then the Nestor School, where she spoke to the fact that she would ride horse with her brother Norman. And then there would be a little barn that you'd park your horses in for the day.
Oh, how cute.
Yeah, and it was literally a one-room school.
Wow, yeah.
They were
Wow.
in, so anyway, so that's Mom did all that, and
That's cool.
yeah, and then I kind of had the bug too, and when I was in college, I decided to put some sheets together, and I kind of copied out information. This was before she made the books, and I also did some family tree stuff. So
Nice.
it's always been an interest of mine to keep track too. And
Yeah.
so I did a family tree, just very rudimentary, but trying
Nice.
to keep track of everything. And so, yeah, I really have a lot. We really owe it to Mom for having done that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't overkill, but at the same time, it was just enough to keep things for
Yeah,
everybody to
everything's
have.
nice and neat, and wow, she was
Right.
very organized.
Right. Yeah.
The farm of your grandparents in Bennett, Colorado, and the U.S. government bought the land through eminent domain. How come they did that?
That was around World War II, and the government was they needed more room for a bombing range.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh,
so
really?
yeah, so it was that
Wow.
first farm was then sold to the government, and it became part of the bombing range.
wow.
Yeah. So, but they ended up buying another farm,
Yeah.
which was the Lone Star Ranch,
Okay.
and that's where they finished their farming at.
Yeah.
Was Lone Star Ranch, and that was closer to Elizabeth. Yeah. Right. So
How recent was that? It was the last couple of decades,
right.
3 or 4 decades?
I don't know exactly. Well, they, my grandparents then moved into Elizabeth in the retirement, so they must have sold it in the 50s, I think, or early 60s. Yeah.
Got it.
And
Okay.
moved into
Yeah,
Elizabeth.
because I saw that eminent domain and, just curious. So that's interesting how,
Yeah.
government bought it.
There goes our life's work. Now it's part of a bombing
Right.
range.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Right.
And now your grandparents' farm is now part of a housing development or something.
yeah,
like
right.
that,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Part of the
It'd be
experts.
kind of cool, though, being an excavator
Ooh, yeah.
person there and just happens to come across, one of those
Right.
trash piles, garbage piles,
Yeah.
from long ago.
Yeah.
Find
Yeah.
some broken pottery,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely my grandfather on the other side, my dad's side, he had a lot of arrowheads that he collected from farming out there.
Oh, I bet.
And,
Wow.
at the time, I don't know, I would imagine they were Cheyenne and perhaps some Arapaho, certainly. And so we do still have some of those arrowheads. I don't know if that's something that we should reconsider in terms of keeping them or not, but it's
Yeah.
it certainly was something that he collected as they worked the fields and such.
yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so that's an interesting kind of relic, but
And that's an interesting thought about who would you talk to about returning relics back to the indigenous folks of whatever land
right.
you're living on.
Yeah, I think good resources would be like History Colorado.
Right.
There's also the Denver Indian Center,
Mm-hmm.
and certainly knowing the fact that it was the Cheyenne and the Arapaho that were in this area. I do have connections with the Northern Arapaho tribe or nation through our high school and such. So, yeah, it's something that I've thought about. I don't actually have any of those, but that is something that that is going on and does continue. And I know that Sand Creek National Historic Site, there is a section there now that they've repatriated, or they've put things back that have been
Oh.
taken from there.
Good.
And certainly encourage anyone and everyone to make a trip to that site.
Yeah.
That site for me is very powerful. And I don't even have any direct connection to it. I was fortunate enough to have Dr. Henrietta Mann as one of my professors at the University of Montana, and Dr. Mann she is Cheyenne, and she told us in class one time about she made the trip down there with her relatives to the where the massacre took place, and at this time it was still fenced off. It wasn't made into a national historical spot, but she and her relatives drove up, and they opened the doors to the car to get out, and she said all they could hear was screaming.
Oh, gosh.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah. And so she said they closed the doors and they left.
Wow.
And to this day,
man.
going down there.
Yeah.
There's a stand of cottonwoods down there in the draw, and I thought about that, and it's like to think about those cottonwoods down there, those plains cottonwoods. They probably were saplings when that happened,
Yeah.
and so they've seen everything.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to read a poem if I could.
Yeah.
Oh, I was
That,
going to say, you got to write a poem about that,
I
but you
know.
have one already?
I'd love to hear that.
This poem, it doesn't directly reference that spot, but the ending image is something that lingers in my head, that just to imagine something like that. This poem was inspired by my son, who's now an architecture major. So I had him send me some words and such, and so I used some of those words in the poem, and that's where the title comes from, but it has something to do with what we're talking about today, so I'll read you it. It's called Continuous and Broken Surfaces. It goes without saying, they left. They left without you. They always do. It all seems so big, cavernous, alienating, this new now. You might as well negotiate an unknown field at night. In the distance, voices of loved ones crosshatch the edge of field. What if this sudden acre gives rise to unexpected mornings of song? Your ancestors know. They left. They left without you. They always do. Absence bestows a kind of caught-in-the-throat kindness. There's a before. There's little to explain. There's an allowance to be had. Wood smoke lingers the cottonwood bottoms.
You should put it in a book. You have beautiful poetry. I really like it.
Thank you. It's not always the easiest. It's a
Yeah.
little abstract.
Yeah.
I'm kind of an idea poet, and that's not necessarily what's popular, but yeah.
Popular schmopular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it looks like it's that time that we have to leave.
Aw.
So, as we always close, we have a disclaimer. And our disclaimer is that the three of us are not certified genealogists. We're just three people who are just sitting around and having a chat about genealogy. We hope that some or all of this information helps you along the way to finding your family. Thanks for listening to another episode of Genealogy Pep Talk, a podcast. Okay, say goodbye, people.
Goodbye,
Goodbye,
people.
All right, and with that, we're out of here. We'll see ya.